I went to a really old school here in Australia, like this old private school that looked more like Hogwarts than the cookie cutter, modern high schools you see in America. It was archaic, to say the least. We had houses, just like the ones in Harry Potter, with our own special colored ties, housemasters, prefects, the works. We also had these big old chemistry labs that were honestly like the kind of stuffy wooden relics where Roger Waters would have been inspired to write The Wall. They had everything, and honestly, they were really fun to have lessons in once we were old enough to be trusted to handle fairly volatile chemicals. Dropping magnesium into water was one of the most fun times I've ever had. So, as you can imagine, I grew to really look forward to chemistry lessons. One day, we're all congregating outside the chemistry labs. We're inside, as it was one of those rare Aussie rainy days that has people absolutely freaking the hell out, like it's acid falling from the sky and not just water. I was stood there yapping away with a few mates of mine when one of them crinkles their nose, sniffing the air like, "Can you guys smell that?" Cue the fart jokes. My mates are being completely juvenile, laughing and wafting their hands near their noses. I mean, you have to forgive us. We were all literally 13 at the time. If there's ever a time to have a childish sense of humor, it's then. But our mate who brought up the smell is still like sniffing the air, looking around, insisting he can smell something weird that's definitely not a fart. After like a minute or so, our chemistry teacher enters the building with a sour gob on him because he's just been rained on. He's all like, excuse me, boys and girls," wading through the sea of kids until he gets roughly where our little group was stood. Then he starts making a similar face to the one my mate was making, sniffing the air and all that before he suddenly has this look of horror on his face. He opens the door to the chem lab we were supposed to be using that day, and Jesus Christ, I will never forget how pale he went after he shut the door again, super slowly. "Boys and girls, start filing outside, please. Make your way towards the dining hall. Single file, please." He was trying to stay as calm as possible, but you could hear the terror in his voice. "But sir, it's raining outside." A girl in our class spoke up, and the look our teacher then shot this girl, like he was going to bloody hip toss her through a window. She didn't say anything after that. We all just walked through the rain towards the dining hall. For those who haven't worked it out yet, I'll break it down. Someone went into the labs, somehow got into a locked room, I think through an open window, and turned on all the bloody gas taps, all of them, to fill the entire room with flammable gas. All it would have taken is one little spark, and that would have been like 100 kids dead, surely. Like I said, this isn't your traditional scary story. I mean, it wasn't even scary at the time, it was just confusing. But I remember knowing something was wrong. I didn't know exactly what, but looking back, it absolutely terrifies me to think how close we all were to a horrible, explosive, fiery death. I moved a lot growing up. By the time freshman year of high school came around, I had moved 7 or so times and was about a year and a half into my most recent move. I had found a pretty close group of friends in middle school, and we all went to high school together. I met him through one of those close friends. They were in band together, and even though he was almost 4 years older than us, we welcomed him into our group. Sam was easily twice my size, tall and heavy-set, and originally kind of intimidating. Although I was never afraid of large men before him, lesson learned. I had a kind of bad home life, and I spent as much time as I could at school, sometimes hanging around the school campus until 6 or 7 at night with this friend group. 3 of us lived in the same direction, and we would walk the half-hour trip together until our paths split. One slightly colder evening, Sam offered to walk me home since the others had gone home already. I just thought he was being a gentleman. He mentioned something from a previous move when he lived in California. He didn't walk a friend home and something horrible happened. He left it at that, and I let him walk me home. We got a lot closer after that. We bonded over both living in California and exchanged numbers. He would message me late into the night about his depression and self-harm, and I just wanted to help. A few months later, he tried asking me out. It was this big romantic gesture. He learned a Disney song on the ukulele and sang to me in the cafeteria, but I was already dating someone, and when I turned him down, he got angry. A freaky, quiet, twitchy kind of angry. I felt so bad. I started seeing him everywhere. We were still friends, we still hung out in groups, but I would pass him on the street walking somewhere, and a few minutes later, I'd see that he changed directions and had started to follow me. He would walk me to classes by following me in passing period at a distance. I started to minimize the group time we spent together, and he would follow me more. I had friends meet me at each class and walk me to my next one because I felt unsafe. He knew where I lived. Then he started to talk. Not to me, but to mutual friends about that one girl in California who he tried to walk home. At first, she just shared my name, some crazy coincidence. Then she had the same brown curly hair and blue eyes, and every time he rambled about her, she became more and more like me. And then he said what happened. Over literal weeks, this fantasy evolved. They were walking home, and they were jumped by some guy with a knife. It was a robbery gone wrong on her birthday, January 24th, which is my birthday, and she died horribly, and he couldn't react in time. She bled out in his arms. Sarah, who has brown curly hair, blue eyes, my name, my birthday, and sounds just like me, bled out in his arms. Each retelling added more and more detail, and this guy with his sick fantasy about my death would follow me around and knew where I lived. My boyfriend was abusive, mentally and physically, but I stayed as close to him as I could whenever I could, because if the worst happened, I knew for sure he could throw a punch. I never felt safe at school or in our little town walking home from school in the dark. One day at school, he had a breakdown, freaked out, and ran out of the school in a panic. I was sent after him, and I found him curled up on the floor. I got closer. I knew about his anxiety and depression, and my safety aside, I wanted to make sure he was okay. It was then that he told me this horrifying story that I had been hearing from mutual friends with added details. We had been walking home from a concert in California. We passed a dark alley, and a homeless man came out with a rusty knife and asked for anything valuable. I fumbled for my phone. I didn't have anything else on me, and he thought I was calling the cops. He stabbed me. Once, twice, again and again, and Sam stood there horrified. He saw red and grabbed a broken glass bottle near my body and attacked the homeless man. He killed him with his own knife. He told me he killed someone. My stalker killed someone. It didn't matter how messed up he was anymore. I didn't care if it was a fantasy or real. I didn't care how it would affect his mental health anymore. I wanted to go to the police. I was scared for my life. My friends convinced me to go to the school counselor first. That morning we went and told them everything. The stalking, the stories, how he admitted to murder. And that was the reason they moved from California. How I was afraid for my life and wanted to call the police. The counselor didn't take us seriously. She went to the principal, and the principal, not a mental health expert, called Sam in to talk about the accusations. The principal then informed me that he did not think that Sam had any kind of mental illness or that I was in any danger, and that was that. I lost faith in adults and gave up on going to the police. I stayed with my friend walking me in between classes, hiding behind my abusive boyfriend, and looking behind me every step of my walk home that year. The counselors ended up gaslighting us to the point where this all feels like a fever dream now, and I would think it's made up if it weren't for my journal entries recording the events and my growing panic, and the similar stories from my friend group. So this happened a few months ago. I'm a sophomore in college and was traveling down to my hometown over break. I was having some relationship issues with my stepmom, so I didn't want to stay at my dad's house the night I arrived in my hometown. I phoned a friend of mine from high school to ask if I could stay at his place. I knew from social media that he was still in town, and I had stayed at his place before, so I knew there would be a place for me to stay if they could allow it. My friend, let's call him Z, seemed like a pretty normal dude. We weren't best friends or anything, but we got pretty close by the time we graduated. We would occasionally text or hang out if I was in town, catching up and reminiscing about the times we spent in orchestra or in English class. When I called, he seemed extremely enthusiastic. Z was normally an upbeat guy, but this time, it seemed like he was getting a brand new car. I didn't think about it at the time, and he said I could sleep in the guest room, so I headed over. When I got to his house, he was just as excited as he was on the phone. He was suggesting things to do like getting high, watching weird movies, or playing video games. Z's parents weren't home, so he really wanted the opportunity to smoke. I was pretty tired from the drive, but since we rarely saw each other, I thought a little bit of bonding couldn't hurt. We played Smash Bros, smoked some weed, and chatted for a few hours. It went longer than I wanted, but I was having fun, so whatever, right? By the time it was getting late, around 2 a.m., he started asking some pretty weird questions. He asked if I ever wondered what it was like to kill someone, or if I thought anyone would miss me if I was gone. along with some normal questions like if I had a boyfriend or how my parents were doing or if I was making any friends at school. It gave me a weird feeling. I was confused in the moment, but it didn't hit me until later that Z could be assessing me for something bad. The weirdness of it all made me just want to go to bed. We stopped the game and both went into the basement where his room and the guest room were. We said goodnight, I went to my room, and got ready for bed. I was having trouble sleeping, just insomnia that I've had for a while, so I stayed awake for around an hour until I heard some movement outside my room. The walls were pretty thin, so I could hear footsteps walking past my door and up the stairs to the main floor, then quickly back down. What struck me as odd was that I didn't hear the basement door open, which usually creaked. The light didn't turn on, so I was confused about what Z was doing. I heard him go back into his room, but I had this odd feeling. Ever since I met him that night, he seemed a lot different than he had ever been. I decided to look him up on social media and Google to see if there was anything out of the ordinary. Everything seemed normal until I found his Tumblr, which was linked from his inactive Twitter account that I found on my Twitter contact list. His Tumblr was, well, disturbing. There were graphic drawings of mutilated bodies of humans and animals, links to suspicious-looking websites that I didn't dare to click on, and text posts about murder, cannibalism, necrophilia, and torture. There were photos of guns, knives, and axes, which, upon closer inspection, were taken in his bedroom. The last post, around a week prior, was a text post from the account saying he wished he could find someone easy to kill, like a homeless person. I was immediately filled with dread. I knew he was going to do something. He must have gone up the stairs to lock the door. I packed my things. Luckily, I packed lightly, and opened the small window at the top of my bedroom's wall. I started desperately climbing through, and as I was pulling my legs through, he opened the door. It was dark, but the streetlight illuminated enough for me to see he was carrying something long and skinny, probably a knife. He didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything. I just turned around, hopped in my car, and drove as fast as I could to my dad's house. I immediately blocked him everywhere and reported his Tumblr account, but not before telling the police. They said they couldn't do anything as the guns were registered under his dad's name, and he hadn't actually done anything yet. Nevertheless, I told my other high school friends not to hang out with Z. Ever since then, I've been creeped out whenever I meet new people. Just the realization that someone I knew so well could be this person who could hurt me so bad, who could kill me. I don't know what you're doing now, Z. I'm not sure I want to know, but I hope you're getting help.